So, as I said before, humanitarian work is very stressful. Yeah, because of the context we work in, especially if we're working in difficult to access populations with armed conflict. Okay, and when we're working in high demand, high stress, difficult conditions, obviously that tends to bring out the worst in people because when you're under stress, you're not at your best. Yeah, you're stressed. So stressed managers can then often have a knock-on effect to their teams. So you need to watch that, because if you're not taking care of yourself and you've become what is very typical, an irritable, stressed manager, then that is not going to work very well for your teams. And I say that from personal experience of often having been either highly irritable or highly withdrawn, sometimes when I was very stressed, and not very interactive with my teams, or not motivating them enough, or not being clear enough about what was going on and what was the strategy. So there are several directions a manager has to be involved in, right? So when I'm a manager, I have assets and people to manage, usually in different scales, different numbers, different number of people, and sometimes resources, financial or cars or whatever. Okay, so that's one level. My team, what we call my direct reports, and the money and resources that I've been allocated to do whatever I'm supposed to be doing. So that's one level. The other level, which is often neglected, is the same level as me, but the other managers, right? So the other teams that are working in other areas, because you're rarely going to be just you and your team working in a vacuum, right? So there will be other managers, other layers, other people that are out within the same organization. Now I'm talking about within the same project or whatever, that are not in your hierarchical or functional lines, but are operating to the same goals, let's say, right? So that's often neglected by managers, right? That layer. And I'll come back to that. Then you have your the layers above you, right? That are either hierarchical, functional, or let's say supportive, right? So you have your direct hierarchical line, that is your boss, and you have perhaps a functional line if it's a technical area, and then you have kind of let's say the planets of different support functions that populate normally an organization and are designed to give either expertise or support or technical support or whatever. So that is very important to take into account, because you need to, as a manager, not just be focused on your team, but you need to be focused on managing also these different layers that I just mentioned. Depending on what your team does, that is how critical its function is. Yeah, because some teams are more, let's say, critical than others by being closer to the actual implementation than, say, if I'm sitting in HQ, then there will be more demands on you, right? So if you're, for example, a project coordinator, yeah, and you have several managers below you, all implementing a different part of the program or the intervention, then you will have much more demands than if, say, you are managing the warehouse and a couple of people in the warehouse. So it's important to understand your kind of place in the grand scheme of things, the place of you and your team. What is it that you and your team are doing? How critical and vital is it to the programs and the operations, and how near you are to the place of intervention, right? That is key, understanding that, right? So it's important also to understand, that the more critical the role of your team is, the more, in fact, you need to work with others, right? And I will explain that later. Also, if you find that your team and yourself are quite near or even far, and you're not busy, there's something wrong. There's something very wrong. Yeah, so you should be busy, but you shouldn't be overwhelmed. And your team should be busy, and they shouldn't be overwhelmed in a good way, right? And we'll talk about the difference between headless chicken mode and running around doing stuff and having too much to do all the time chronically, and being busy productively. We'll talk about that and how to know the difference.